Fantasy football junkies. You are tuned in to the #1 source for fantasy prognostication. It's Testosterone Fantasy Sports with your hosts, Jeff and Jesse. So listen up. Here's your chance to gain the edge over the competition and dominate your fantasy football league. Every week we break down all of the matchups and tell you who to play as well as who should ride the pine. This is the joint that every fantasy junkie needs, so check it out!
Welcome, football fans, to Testosterone Fantasy Sports. I'm your host, Jeff. With me today, my esteemed co-host, Eric Nelson. Thanks a lot for being here, Eric. Going to do a little fist pound, what we do here on the show. It is week 7 in the NFL, and this is Testosterone Fantasy Football. I hope you're prepared for an action-packed and fun-filled episode where we're going to break down all the matchups. But of course, we have to start with our beloved purple, the Vikings, coming off a big-time victory at the Chicago Bears. Eric, I was so happy to see that. You know, our boys got off the schneid in that game, got a win in a big divisional game. The Bears just weren't that good. You know, we were able to take them down. 34 points we scored.
Yeah, the Purple Nation really needed that Viking win last week in Chicago. And, yeah, it's great to be back here, Jeff. We got to stop meeting like this.
Yeah.
I think this is the second week in a row. But that was a huge win at Soldier Field in Chicago. They hadn't won there in 7 years. And Adrian Peterson had a day for the ages. I think as time goes on and we look back at that effort, well over 300 total yards, I believe 224 on the ground, 3 long touchdown runs. And you think about it, in the long and storied history of the Chicago Bears, they're one of the charter teams in the NFL. Nobody's run for more yards in one game against Adrian Peterson. The previous record was 216 by Ricky Williams. And ironically, when I did my book, Slices of the NFL, I was in Miami that night. There was a monsoon down at Dolphin Stadium, and Ricky Williams ran through the bog that was Dolphin Stadium that night. And so that just tells me how good Adrian Peterson was on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, what an experience that would be to see Ricky Williams go off like that. Obviously, everybody around here is so excited to see what Adrian can do. It's like he's got magic ankles out there. He reverses his field so well. He turns on a dime. And, yeah, a couple hundred yards on the ground, which is crazy to say in and of itself. 3 touchdowns. And also, you know, we've kind of batted around the whole kickoff return thing. With only 8 attempts, he's already 6th in the league at per return average. I'm real impressed with that. And I think it's working for our team. And against the Bears, Eric, I know that that his ability to return definitely played a factor for us. And then, you know, when our offense gets a good field position, it really showed for Tarvaris Jackson. He seemed more confident, more comfortable in the pocket, and even hooked up with Troy Williamson on a nice touchdown. Yeah,
that was big that Tarvaris got that early long pass to Troy. I think it was 60 yards. Kind of got the Vikings, you know, moving in the right direction after that Devin Hester thrilling punt return for a score. You know, as far as the kickoff returns, you're right. I mean, if you go back to the game-winning field goal by Ryan Longwell, it was set up by Adrian Peterson with a big chunk of yards on the kickoff return after Chicago had tied it. I don't really have a problem with that. Now, in my own opinion, I would spot him a little more on kickoff returns. There is a high risk of injury. I'm not afraid of putting him back there, and I certainly understand what he can bring to the table. I might pick my spots when I have him return kicks as opposed to, you know, maybe putting him back there on every kickoff. But, you know, I'd try to get him the ball maybe a little bit more as a running back. Or, you know, use this guy with play action. His presence on the field means you have to account for him. So that play action, you know, fake the ball into his gut. Once the linebackers see that, they're going to freeze for a nanosecond. They have to respect him, and then maybe that's going to set Tarvaris up for some throws that will hopefully make him a better quarterback. But we are seeing someone special in Adrian Peterson. I don't think I can recall this kind of excitement since '98 when a guy named Randy Moss came here.
Yeah, that's right. And Randy kind of surprised everybody with his abilities. Everybody saw Adrian coming. They call him all day in the NFL, and before that, we lovingly refer to him as AP. You know, Adrian Peterson is why I also like to call him always productive and amazing performance. So a lot of different ways you can roll with that. The guy who's kind of getting overshadowed here is Chester Taylor, but I was really happy to see 22 carries, Added Chester Taylor, to me that shows diversity on our offense, especially when we're lacking a little bit at the receiving position. And to have Adrian and Chester on the field at the same time was also something I was real pleased to see. And they even split both those guys out wide a couple of times. So it seemed to keep the defense on their heels a little bit. And when you're faced with a good defensive team like the Bears, making them guess right before the snap is a definite thing in your favor. So I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, I think Chester
that.
Taylor, we don't want to forget about him, and obviously Brad Childress hasn't. He's still #1 on the depth chart. That does sound kind of absurd that Peterson's not the starter, but it really doesn't matter who's 1, who's 2, as long as Adrian Peterson's getting his touches. You know, Chester Taylor ran for 83 yards. There's certainly room for him in this offense. You bring up a valid point. I mean, the Vikings, as far as throwing the ball, it's still a work in progress. I do envision Sidney Rice becoming a force somewhere down the road. I don't know if it's going to be this year. I think Tavares Jackson obviously his learning curve is still, working right now. But Adrian Peterson and Chester Taylor, that's a 1-2 combination that really right now I don't think any team in the NFL can touch.
Yeah, and it's a nice luxury for us to have Chester out there. It gives us the ability to use Adrian Peterson in the return game. And then, Chester, in the NFL, you got to have your best weapons on the field as much as possible. And for this team, Chester is probably our second or third best option on the offensive side of the ball. So a nice all-around effort by the Vikings in Week 6 to topple the Bears. The Bears now find themselves in the cellar at 2-3. And one question I definitely wanted to ask you, Eric, are the Bears, in your opinion, the worst team in this division?
Wow. On paper right now, given the fact they lost head-to-head to the Vikings, you'd have to say yes. It's still early. They're still the NFC champions. They're well coached with Lovie Smith. Brian Griese, I think, brings a little more stability than Rex Grossman. But defensively, they're not the same. They're not what they were a year ago. Dazzling Devin Hester is just as good as ever. I mean, that guy he's their Adrian Peterson. But you have to look at that Bears defense now and wonder, are they going to be able to find their mojo and their rhythm? Remember, Tank Johnson is down now in Dallas. He's going to soon play for the Cowboys. That's a big presence out of the middle of their lineup, a space eater. They've got some injuries that have set them back. But, right now they're struggling. They may be a team that struggles to win 8 or 9.
Yeah. Well, they may be struggling, and that gives me a great big smile because it means the Vikings are out of the cellar in the NFC North, and I couldn't be happier about that. There is another team that we can kick some dirt in the face of as they eat our dust now. 3rd place. All right, I got to be happy about that.
We're number 3.
For at least another week anyway, and this week that brings us to the Vikings matchup. We go down to Dallas, the Vikings at Dallas. It's going to be a big-time game for the Cowboys. They got crushed, basically, by the New England Patriots last week. And so for me, that makes it tough to be the opponent of the guy who just got slapped in the face by the bigger bully. So I think that's kind of too bad for us, given the scheduling and stuff like that. But I don't know, Eric, tell me what you think's going to happen here in this game in Dallas.
Well, I think sometimes in the NFL, it's not who you play, but when you play them. And your point is good. New England rang up a 48 on Dallas last week. I mean, the Cowboys were competitive. They had a lead in the 3rd quarter, but the Patriots just woke up, flexed their muscle. Tom Brady, 5 touchdown passes. Right now, they're a juggernaut. I think if you look at this road trip for the Vikings, they went into Chicago, the defending NFC champions. They were able to win at Soldier Field. That's a difficult thing to do for any team. Now they're being asked the following week to go into Texas Stadium, one of the great venues in all of the NFL, and beat a team that most people think will be the future NFC champions. So it's going to be a challenge. I mean, we're talking about climbing, the mountain of mountains here down there in Irving, Texas. Can they do it? Sure, I think they can, just like I said that last week, but I didn't have the guts to say they would do it, and I'm going to stick with that this week. I think Tony Romo and that Dallas Cowboy offense, #1 in the NFC in scoring with 204 points, I think they're going to gash the Vikings defensively, or at least the Vikings better figure a way to stop them, because Romo is good. T.O., Patrick Creighton, and that tight end Jason Witten. Boy, can he find the seam and make catches.
Yeah, right now Jason Witten is a top-rated tight end in your fantasy football league. He makes a fantastic start here. Patrick Creighton is a real nice bye-week fill-in, primarily because the Vikings still have yet to stop the pass. Again, we're great at stopping the rush, #2 in the league currently. Although that's a bad matchup for us because we have to face, our rush defense has to face the tough running of Marion Barber, and man, that guy really runs with heart.
Yeah, I love the way Marion
Yeah.
Barber plays, and I was saying earlier in the week on the radio, a little bit of irony this week. Marion Barber from Wayzata, former Gopher, grew up, I'm sure, a Viking fan, now going to try to, inflict some pain on the
Yes.
Vikings and their fans. Meanwhile, you have Adrian Peterson from Palatine, Texas, big Cowboy fan as a kid, and he's wearing purple, and he's going to try to hurt America's team. So a little role reversal there at running back should be a good angle. The Fox crew,
Yes.
I'm sure, will play it up. I'm not so sure you don't see Marion Barber, put up the big numbers. Now, running on the Vikings, as we know, is extremely difficult. But if they can throw, that might set Marion Barber up for a big play or two.
Yeah, Marion Barber and Julius Jones do a really nice job of complementing each other. Here in this game, I really feel like it's going to be Marion Barber as the productive start for your fantasy team. Julius Jones, I got real tempered expectations. He's smaller. He doesn't bring the load, so he's going to get taken down a lot easier by Big Pat and Kevin Williams. The next thing I want to get into, how is it possible for the Vikings to win this game? Any ideas?
Well, I think turnovers certainly can always change the course of a game. If we see the Tony Romo we saw on Monday night a couple of weeks ago in Buffalo, where he throws a couple of picks and the Vikings get some defensive scores, that could make Minnesota's day a lot more productive. So that would be number one. Penalties could be the other. The Vikings only, I think, had 2 or 3 last week in Chicago. They need to keep those penalties to a minimum. I would say this. This is one week when you want to see the Minnesota Vikings chew up the clock, a lot of ball control, time-consuming drives that end up in points, though. They can't end up in threes.
Yes.
They got to end up with touchdowns, which they got last week, 4 of them.
Finally.
Which equaled what they had offensively going into that game. So the Dallas Cowboys are going to score. But if you keep Romo and company off the field, they can't score. So to me, that would be the formula for the Vikings maybe going down there and stealing a win. But I go back to what you said earlier. Dallas is coming off that loss to New England. And Dallas looks in the rearview mirror and sees the Giants at 4-2. The Washington Redskins are close. That's a competitive NFC East. No wiggle room for the Cowboys. They got to get it going again.
Yeah, the last thing that the Cowboys want to do is put 2 losses back to back. All of a sudden, the questions that they would have to answer media-wise, and Terrell Owens not so good under pressure when it comes to that kind of thing. They're going to be up big time for this game. On the fantasy side of everything, the fact that Adrian Peterson grew up only 100 miles away from Dallas makes me think that he is going to want to put on a show for all his friends and family, and it's his first chance to play in front of all them live. So I think he's going to really run with a lot of heart. Keep him in your lineup. The Vikings defense makes a good start. Still, because they're scoring so well, they're always very opportunistic. And of course, if we want to win, Tarveris is going to have to play similar mistake-free type of football that he played at Chicago in order for us to have a chance. And then defensive and special teams big plays are the keys here, in my opinion.
Yeah, and special teams always is something that we tend to maybe not focus on, but they're huge. You look at last week, for the Bears, Devin Hester had the long punt return for a score. Adrian Peterson's kickoff return set up Ryan Longwell for a 55-yard kick at the gun. I mean, those were all special teams plays. So I think that's part of it. You know, the Dallas Cowboys offensively on that line, they're very big, they're very physical. That's kind of one of their trademarks. So are they going to be able to, move back Pat Williams, Kevin Williams, and that outstanding purple wall up front? I think there's a lot of angles to this. Also the coaching angle, Wade Phillips. Historically, he's a defensive coach, Jeff. I know that Dallas has struggled in a couple of games defensively this year against the Giants and then last week against the Patriots. But my hunch tells me he has spent this week devising a scheme to you don't stop Adrian Peterson, but to contain him.
Yes.
And to make sure he doesn't go off to the tune of 200-plus yards.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, if the Bears would have caught Adrian on one of those long plays, they could have still won that game. So I'm sure the Cowboys are keeping their eyes on the film of that game, specifically coaching their guys to keep contained and not allow the cutback. I would expect.
And boy, does he cut back. I mean, that vision he has and that ability where he's going this way and then, boom, he's this way and then he's around the corner and suddenly he's winning a foot race. It's a combination of power and speed that I'm not sure we've seen in this league for a while. I'm already hearing people mention him with LaDainian Tomlinson.
I know. Well, his skill set sure seems to be real similar to LT's. I mean, he's a flashy baller with a heart of a lion. So when you got those combinations there, you find a guy who can put a team on his shoulders. And think we're seeing the start of something special.
Yeah, it's exciting here in Minnesota, and I know we talked last week about the future of the Vikings, and I really believe this state needs to step up and figure out the stadium situation. Get this team here long term. You don't want to lose an NFL team. They're too successful. It's a model business, the NFL, all that good stuff. Gosh, Adrian Peterson. He might have helped that stadium cause more than anybody last week.
Yeah, he's descended from the heavens. Thank you. Next time he'll run across Lake Erie or whichever lake that is on this, that the Bears Stadium
Michigan.
is by. Lake Michigan. Thanks. No, but anyway, everybody out there, you are locked and loaded to testosterone. We're gonna go to a quick break. I suppose if we talked about the stadium situation, all that'd be a whole other show. But we do have all matchups to break down. So stay tuned. We'll be right back, and we'll start breaking down the matchups for your fantasy football success. Be right back.